Trauma and Homelessness Among African American Women, a Qualitative Narrative Inquiry Study. My name is LaMonica Graham, and I appreciate the opportunity to present my comp exam video. My research is driven by a deep passion for understanding and addressing homelessness with a particular focus on African American women who experience housing instability as a result of trauma and systematic inequalities. This topic is especially meaningful to me because I am committed to contributing research that amplifies the voice of marginalized populations and trauma-informed interventions. Through this study, I hope to provide meaningful insights into the live experience of African American women experiencing homelessness and contribute to scholarship that support positive social change and improve support systems for this valuable population. This video presentation demonstrates how trauma theory, intersectionality theory, and structural vulnerability theory provide an integrated theoretical framework for examining how African American women experience and making meaning of trauma in relation to homelessness. Homelessness in the United States continues to rise, shaped by structural inequalities and economic instability. Georgia and the city of Savannah reflect these trends, underscoring the need for localized, population-specific research. My study focuses on African American women who are disproportionately affected by trauma and housing instability. Over 650,000 individuals are homeless on a single night. In the state of Georgia, 6,633 individuals. This information came from our 2024 PIT count. PIT stands for Point in Time. Savannah, Chatham County, 582 individuals were homeless the year 2026. The peer review articles were identified through searches, PsycInfo, SocialIndex, PubMed, ProQuest, dissertations and theses, Google Scholar, and social service abstracts. Literature published between 2010 and 2025 was prioritized to capture contemporary research on trauma, homelessness, and structural inequalities. Foundational works predating this period were included historically or theoretically significant. Out of 300 articles, I selected 85 of them. The inclusion criteria was address trauma or housing instability, include African American women, or provide race-specific findings, examine structural, interpersonal, cumulative contributors to homelessness, utilize quantitative, or mixed message designs relevant to this topic. Why African American women? African American women experience trauma across life course, including interpersonal violence, racial discrimination, community level stressors. These experiences intersect with structural inequalities, yet their voices remain largely absent from the homelessness research. There is a research gap. Trauma, often treated as secondary, over-reliance on quantitative measures, lack of narratives inquiries, limited research in Savannah, Georgia. Existing studies separate structural and individual explanations or overlook trauma as a central mechanism. Narrative inquiries fill this gap by centering lived experience and meaning making. The purpose of this study: to explore how women narrate trauma, understanding the meaning making process, examining life course experiences, focus on Savannah, Georgia. The purpose is to explore how African American women describe and make meaning of trauma as it relates to homelessness. Narrative inquiries allows me to examine trauma as a lived and story experience. My research problem: African American women experience disproportionate rates of trauma exposure and homelessness. Existing research often examines trauma or homelessness separately. Limited qualitative research explores how African American women narrate the relationship between trauma and homelessness. Structure and systematic inequalities further complicate housing instability. The study addresses a significant gap in the literature by examining how African American women understand and describe trauma within the context of homelessness. Along with the primary question, how do African American women narrate the ways trauma has shaped their likelihood of experiencing homelessness? There are three sub-questions. Number one, how do women describe traumatic experiences? Number two, how do intersecting identities emerge in their stories? Number three, how do women describe structural barriers? These questions guide the narrative exploration of trauma, identity, and structural vulnerability. The integrated theoretical framework: trauma theory, intersectionality theory, structural vulnerability theory. The purpose: to understand individual experiences, intersecting identities, and structural conditions that shape homelessness. These theories operate together rather than independently. Trauma theory explains lived experiences of adversity. Intersectionality theory explains how identities shape those experiences. And structural vulnerability theory explains how systems create vulnerability. The trauma theory provides the foundation for understanding how traumatic experience influence emotional, behavior, and social functioning. The epistemology: knowledge merges through understanding lived experience of trauma. The ontology: trauma is real and meaningful experience that shape human functioning. The application: trauma exposure, meaning making, coping strategies, and housing instability pathways. Intersectionality theory helps explain why African American women's experiences differ from those of other populations experience homelessness. Epistemology: knowledge is socially situated. Ontology: reality is shaped by power relations and social structures. Application: race, gender, class, multiple forms of oppression. Structural vulnerability theory shifts attention away from individual blame and towards systematic contributors to homelessness. Epistemology: knowledge must be considered structural and institutional context. Ontology: vulnerability is socially produced. Application: housing discrimination, economic inequality, policy barriers, and institutional exclusion. Let's take a look at the conceptual model. Structural inequalities, trauma exposure, meaning-making processes, housing instability, homelessness, intersectionality influences each stage. The conceptual model demonstrates how structural factors create conditions for trauma exposure, while intersectionality shapes how experiences are interpreted and lived. The major key constructs are: for trauma, childhood adversity; interpersonal violence, systematic trauma; for intersectionality, race, gender, social economic status; for structural vulnerability, housing access, employment barriers, institutional equalities outcome, experience of homelessness. These constructs are explored through participant narratives rather than measured quantitatively. The alignment with the research design. The research question: how do African American women narrate the ways trauma has shaped their likelihood of experiencing homelessness? Methodology: qualitative, narrative inquiry, semi-structured interviews, purposive sampling. Theoretical assumptions directly inform the choice of qualitative narrative inquiries and the participant selection. The data collection will include narrative interviews, participant storytelling, and reflexive engagement. The data analysis will include the narrative analysis, thematical interpretation, theory-informed coding. Theories guide interpretation while allowing the participant voices to remain central to the analysis. This framework supports analysis across the micro, meso, and macro levels. At the micro level, I examine trauma symptoms and coping. At the meso level, I consider interpersonal violence and community conditions. At the macro level, I will analyze structural barriers such as housing policy and discrimination. This multi-level approach aligns with social work's person and environment perspective. The theoretical integration has important implications for practice. It supports trauma-informed, culturally responsive interventions. For organizations, it highlights the need for cross-sector collaboration and training in intersectional trauma-informed care. For policy, it underscores the importance of expanding affordable housing and addressing systematic inequalities that disproportionately affect African American women. My critical reflection: limitations. Trauma theory may overemphasize individual experiences. Intersectionality theory, complex and analytical application. Structure vulnerability theory may underemphasize individual support. I address these limitations by integrating all three frameworks. I use transparent coding and reflexivity to manage tensions. This strengthens the rigor and coherence of the study. There are 4 takeaways. Number 1, theoretical integration strengthens exploratory power. Number 2, the framework aligns with narrative inquiry methodology. Number 3, multiple levels of influence are addressed. Number 4, findings can inform social work practice, policy, and advocacy. This study contributes a multidimensional understanding of homelessness. It centers African American women voices and lived experiences. It advances trauma informed, intersectional, and structural social work practice. Chapter 1 establishes the problem, purpose, and research question, while Chapter 2 reviews the literature and identify key gaps. Together, they provide the foundation for a quantitative study. The key factor is understanding the relationship between trauma and homelessness is essential to creating effective, culturally responsive interventions that move beyond the temporary housing solutions toward lasting stability. Please see the references that are listed. Thank you for listening to my presentation.